What are modifiers? Modifiers do what they're kind of called. They modify your mesh, and it makes it very easy to easily create like different kind of models and interesting shapes, and makes hard surface modeling a lot easier. Doesn't even have to be hard surface, just makes modeling in general a lot easier to do. So in this video I'm going to be going over the main modifiers that should help you in your modeling or scenes, and so let's get into it. So your Modifiers tab is going to be this little wrench right here. So on our little toolbar, I guess you can call it, you have this wrench right here. Once you click it, you have Add Modifier. Okay, so the Modifiers tab is a very powerful and simple kind of like tool base thing. So the one that I by far used most often, and that you'll see in a lot of tutorials, is something called a Subdivision Surface. Now what that does is it basically just subdivides the mesh and gives it more like faces and stuff. And I'm going to show you this on a sphere because it's more apparent on a sphere. So I'm just going to delete my cube and just add in a sphere by hitting Shift A and adding a sphere. I don't think I covered that in the last video actually. To add in an object, Shift and A to get to this menu, and then you can just add in your objects right here. You have a plane, cube, circle, UV sphere, icosphere, cylinder, cone, and torus. UV sphere is what we're going to use for this, and you can see if you wanted a smooth object, this wouldn't be very good to use, just because of how like flat it is. Then you can kind of fix that by right-clicking on it and clicking Shade Smooth. But you can kind of see like through here, it's still like flat, and it's just not smooth. So the way you can see it right here, there's like an edge right there. So the way we'd fix that is we'd add a subdivision surface to this. So I'm just gonna actually shade it flat so you can see it in action right here. And so basically, and I'm also going to show you in Wireframe so you can see how many faces there are right now. And if I go back into solid view, by the way, do this, you hit Z. If I add a subdivision surface, right, you can see it gives it more faces. And usually for a sphere, I add about 2 subdivisions. And in this menu, you have your view subdivisions, your render subdivisions, and quality. I don't really mess with quality a lot, since I find that it's fine how it is. Render is obviously how many subdivisions is going to be on your object when you actually render it out. And usually you wouldn't make this higher than the view, or usually you wouldn't make this lower than the view. But let's say you wanted an object that needed to be subdivided a lot, and you might have your render at like 5, but it lags your computer and you can't handle it. So you turn your view down and say like 2 or 3, and it would just, in your viewport right here, it would show it as 2 or 3 subdivisions, but in your final render it'll be about 5 or whatever you set it as. Now, I don't really mess with simple, just cause like I don't really mess with it. I don't really know what it does actually, so I don't really mess with it. So now if we shade smooth, you can see that it's completely round and flat, and it's all good. And if I go into Wireframe, you can see that we have more faces now. So if I delete that by just clicking this X right here, you can see that it is now deleted, and we no longer have modifiers. So also mirror. Mirror, what you'll have to do is have an object in it to mirror it from. So I just go to add, and I think it is mesh. Where's empty at? Oh, it's right here. Empty and just plain axis, and just hit G and then snap it to this and just move it over. And then if I mirror object, select the empty right here, and then just, which one? Yeah. So if I mirror it on the y-axis, you can see that it now mirrors it from this edge over. So it's really cool if you're making something that needs to be symmetrical, needs to be like flipped, or like what I would use it for is like if I'm making a terrain and I need the terrain to be bigger, I would just mirror it just so it connects up evenly, instead of like for example, if you have a terrain, right, and there's like a hump on the end, if you duplicate it, it won't match up correctly, so that's why you mirror it, so they they match up correctly and there won't be any like clipping issues. So that's a mirror modifier. Next modifier is, I'm gonna go over the Boolean and Bevel modifier. So I'm just gonna add 2 cubes and Shift D is to duplicate. So I just duplicated the cube right there. So first I'm gonna go over Bevel. Okay, so Bevel right here. I don't really use this a lot. I don't use the actual modifier. I use beveling, but I don't use the actual modifier. So width controls how beveled it actually is. So if I turn it down back to like 0.1, I can turn it even more to get like a sharper bevel, and then 0 is actually, or just no bevel. And then if I increase it a lot, you can see that it's like really flat. So if I increase the segments, you can see that it adds faces to it. It makes the bevels smoother. So I don't really mess with any of these. I don't really use this modifier a lot, actually. So I don't really mess with anything here. What I do is I just go Tab and Control B. Well, Tab actually. I went over this last video, but Tab just changes this object mode up here to edit mode, and it's easier than just selecting it. So if you just hit Tab, then it goes in edit mode, and this is what you'll use for like modeling and stuff. And if I hit Control B and I bring up, you can see that I can bevel it, and then now get those extra faces to give the smoother bevel. You just use your scroll wheel to either scroll up or down to give it more faces, or more segments, and now you have a smooth thingy. So I'm just gonna undo that really quick. And I'm going to size up my, actually this would be better with a plane. If I just add a plane, or Y90, nope, it's X90. Okay, now just scale it up. I take this cube, right, and I like move it into this. And let's say I wanted to make a really simple window, right? Usually, what a lot of people do, and what I do, what I used to do when I first started, was I would just add loop cuts. Now, loop cuts, I'm actually going to move this out of the way a little bit. Loop cuts are really handy in modeling to, like, change geometry and stuff. Basically, what you do to add a loop cut is basically a simple subdivision, is the way I describe it. So if I have this selected and I hit Control R, you can see that we now have these yellow lines in places. So if, let's say I wanted to move this in, like, I wanted to move a lot, like, I'm saying like a lot. Wow. Okay. So let's say I wanted to make this middle part go out this way. So the way I do that is I have a tab in edit mode and just Control R, and then you see this yellow line right here. I click and you can drag where you want to put it. I'm just gonna put mine in the middle, and then you click again and now you have this extra segment or edge. So now what you can do is go into edge select. Up here, this is face select, so you can grab faces. This is vertex select, so you can grab vertices. And then this is edge select, so you can grab edges. And also to grab multiple, you just shift. So let's say I wanted to grab this, and then I could just G and move this out. And now we have that. So I'm just going to undo all that, because we don't need it, by hitting Control Z. Oops, I'm going to undo a lot actually. Okay, so basically that's what you do a lot. Is you just add like a subdivision like over here, here, but that gives a lot of unnecessary work. So let's say I wanted to make this cube a window, right? What I do is I would select the plane, which is going to be the object that we're applying the Boolean modifier to. I go to add modifier, Boolean, and now intersect. What you do to apply the Boolean is just select the object that's inside the other object. So if I select this cube, intersect basically just changes the plane to the size of the cube. Union makes them one, and basically just combines them. I don't really use that one since you don't really need to, but and difference is what I usually use. And you can see kind of right here, it cuts out the window. If I hit apply and then I delete the cube, we can see that we now have a window or cutout the size of the cube. Now this works for any mesh. Some of them don't really work as good with others, so just experiment with it and you'll see. And yeah, so that's that. That's a Boolean modifier. So if I add another cube, what other modifiers do we have that I use a lot? build can be used for a lot of interesting stuff. So if I have a sphere and I add a subdivision surface and stuff, and maybe subdivide it 2 times. Let's say I wanted a like I wanted this kind of glitchy matrix effect. What I do is I'd add a modifier to it called build, and it's just right here, start and length. Start is what frame it starts on. I'm going to change that to 0, and length is how many frames it goes. So basically, if you go down here to your timeline and click play, you can see that it builds the sphere from where it starts, and it lasts 100 frames. As you can see right here, once it gets to 100, it'll be completed, and it is. So if I wanted to get a more matrixy effect, you can use that for a lot of stuff, but this randomize key over here, if I click randomize, it kind of like speckles it out right here, which I think is kind of cool. So that's pretty cool. Also, introduction to another modifier. It's called Solidify. Solidify does exactly what it says. It solidifies the mesh. So if I hide this, if I hide this, you can see that it takes away the thickness from this, and you can change the thickness. If I wanted to be like this, and then I could like build it like this, which looks really weird. But that's that. So you probably noticed the weird kind of like shading on these faces. It's because I have smooth shading on. So I didn't actually know this until about a few weeks ago. The way to fix that is if you add a edge split modifier. Not exactly sure what this does, but I know it helps me when I want to make sure the shading is fine on an object. That's like it's cylinder. It makes a lot better stuff. Like you can also use modifier stacks, which are just like modifiers on top of each other, and in certain orders they do certain things. I'm not going to explain that just because there's like a ton of possibilities you can do with it. But yeah, that's what that does. So any other modifiers that I want to array does like exactly what it pretty much says. It just duplicates meshes and stuff. You can also add an object offset, so it would basically just array over an object. So if you had like an empty right here, it would like go up and then like array around that empty. But yeah, that's the array modifier. Displace modifier is what you'd use for displacements. So you just create a new texture, and it's like this little like texture tab thing. And then if you have a material and you're assigning materials to it, and you had a displacement texture, you just go down here to open. But if you just wanted a procedural displacement texture, you have all these textures. So if I use like Musgrave, you can see that I get this cool looking design, and you can change the size and everything on it, which that looks pretty cool actually. I've never used that in that way before. That's really cool. I don't really know what this does. Dimension, just like that. Linearity is how many is how like zoomed in it is what it looks like. Octaves is like how detailed it is. Intensity is just how intense the displacement is. That looks really cool actually. So, and then I delete that. Armature, you don't really use that unless you're rigging a character. Decimate is one that I want to talk about. Okay, so basically, Decimate, what it does is you can't really see it with the sphere, so I'm not going to do it with the sphere. I'm actually going to add an icosphere. Let's see. Okay, so basically I add a Decimate modifier with an icosphere. See what it does is it reduces the faces on it. So right here is this face count. It normally has 80, but you can bring it down all the way to 2. What this is used for is it's really good for obviously reducing faces, and I use it a lot mainly in low poly stuff. So if I'm making like a low poly whatever and I have like a high poly mesh of it, then usually you can just slap on it. This is pretty much a lazy way to do it. just slap on our Decimate modifier, and it gives it a more low poly look. So that's what Decimate does. Remesh. Let's see. This is the one that I'm thinking of. Then I don't really use this one often. Not exactly sure what this does actually. I'll have to research that. If anyone knows in the comments, then just let me know. Skin. Skin is basically if you have a let me make a curve. So if I just circle, oh, nope, curve, and I make just this, scale it up. Then I add a skin modifier. Oh, I can't add a skin modifier. Oh yeah, it's a curve. Oh my god. Okay, I was trying to make a point there, but it just didn't work. Let's say I have a cube, right? And I select these vertices, delete those, delete that vertice. So I have this vertice, right? And I just extrude it by hitting E in edit mode. I have this, right? And I have this cool thing, but I wanted to give it some actual geometry. I would add a modifier and then add a skin modifier, and you can see that it gives it a thingy. So then Control A can resize it if you just click on different vertices. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty useful if you're making like a tree or something. But if you have like just some vertices that you want to give geometry to, then you can go ahead and do that. So those are basically the ones that I use a lot. Wireframe is one that I use, and it just basically it changes your mesh to a wireframe, and you can change the thickness to it, whatever. I think that's all. Also simulations over here, which I'm not going to really go into detail with since they're not really modifiers, and I'm going to make a completely separate tutorial on simulations and stuff. But I think that's all I want to say. All the main ones that I use and stuff like that. Smooth, just kind of smooths the mesh. Yes, I think that's what I pretty much want to do. So that's all for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys understand modifiers a little bit better, especially well, the main ones at least. I know I didn't go too much in detail on the little ones, but those are the main ones that you will use and how to use them and what they do. So hopefully you guys learned something from this video. If you did, make sure to leave in the comments below. I'm really close to 100 subscribers, and it's making me really happy, you know. So thanks you guys so much for watching. My name's Fizz. See you guys next time. Bye.